Okay, today we're going to replace the 5D process with solving equations. So we're going to take that 5D table that we used to do, and in place of it, we're going to write an equation and solve the equation now that we know how to solve equations. Okay, so if you don't have a textbook, you're going to need volume 2, and you're going to have to open to page 352, problem 6-94, the 5D process revisited. Pause the video and grab a textbook. While you're up, you should get a piece of paper that has holes in it as well. All right, it says use the 5D process to set up the following problem. Well, I can tell you now we are not using the 5D process, so I'm crossing that off. I'm going to now read the problem, and I'm going to highlight the important things that I think we're going to need. It says the Great Lakes contain the largest amount of fresh water on the surface of the planet. Combined, the 5 lakes, Lake Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, contain 84% of North America's and 21% of the world's fresh water. All of that is fluff. There's no information there. It doesn't give us anything about variables, so we can cross it off. I'm on the third paragraph now. The amount of water in Lake Superior is 1,720 cubic miles more than the amount of water in Lake Michigan. That is important. Lake Huron has 330 cubic miles of water less than Lake Michigan. Also important. And the total amount of water in the 3 lakes is 49,930 cubic miles. Also important. It says how much water is in each lake. So we're going to use this information to solve and write an equation. Okay, step 1 is going to define our variables. So when we did the 5D process, we did this describe draw stage, and that's kind of what the define your variables is going to be. So the first thing is to pull out the important information. So we did highlight it in that last step. Okay, so I went ahead and highlighted that important information, and I'm going to go ahead and write on the paper now. So it's Lake Superior. I'm going to use LS, and then we have Lake Michigan, and we have Lake Huron, and then we have our total. So right away I'm pulling out the most important information. The total I'm going to go ahead and write in 4930, and Lake Superior is 1,720 cubic miles more than the amount in Lake Michigan, which means I need Lake Michigan first. So that's going to be X. Lake Superior is going to be Lake Michigan plus 1,720. And Lake Huron has 330 cubic miles of water less than Lake Michigan. So the amount Lake Michigan has minus 330. Make sure you're copying this down on your paper, because when we get to the next page, we're not going to have this anymore. Okay, so far this is how I have my paper set up. Step 1, define your variables. Step 2, write and solve an equation. So we're going to write and solve an equation. I'm going to do it on my paper, and then I'm going to take a picture. Okay, so I've never tried this feature. I'm going to write as I video. So I'm going to write the amount Lake Michigan has, which is X plus 1720 plus Lake Michigan, X, plus Lake Huron, X minus 330, and that's going to equal 4930. That's what you should have. So our next step is going to be to simplify. Okay, and I'm going to put X, X, and X all together. So that gives me 3X. Then I have to put 1720 and negative, that has a negative, 330 together. So 1720 minus 330. Is 1390. And that's positive because 1720 was positive. sorry, I didn't show you that subtraction I did up there, equals 49, 30. So you're going to solve this like you would any equation. You have 3x plus 1390 equals 4930. So I'm going to subtract 1390 from both sides. I'm left with 3x equals, do your subtraction, 0, 0, 0, 13 minus 9 is 4. This would have been an 8. 8 minus 3 is 5, and 4 minus 1 is 3. So your last step is to divide, because this is 3 times x. So I'm going to divide by 3. And I'm going to be left with x equals, well, let's do it over here, 3540 divided by 3. Goes once, bring down the 5, goes once, bring down the 3, 2, bring down your 4, it goes 8. So it's going to be 1,180. So what does that represent? Well, that is x, and x up here was Lake Michigan. So now we know that Lake Michigan is going to be 1,180. So Lake Michigan has 1,180 cubic miles of water. But we have to find out the other ones. So now we have to go back up to our statements, and we have to put 1,180 in for x. So we're going to add it to 1720, and then we're going to do it down here. We're going to do 1,180 minus 330. Okay, so go ahead and grab a calculator and do those. Okay, so you should have gotten for Lake Superior 2,900 and Lake Huron 850. So we're going to finish that sentence out. So here's our final sentence. Lake Michigan has 1,180 cubic miles of water. Lake Superior has 2,900 miles cubed, and Lake Huron has 850 miles cubed of water. So in conclusion, you should have a define, an equation that you solve, and a sentence that answers the question. If you think you need more practice, continue watching the next example. The next example can be found on page 345. It says, in the first 3 football games of the season, Carlos gained 3 times as many yards as Alston. Travis gained 10 yards more than Carlos. Altogether, the 3 players gained a total of 430 yards. How many yards did Carlos gain? So our first step is to pull out the important information. So the important information is mostly right here. Carlos gained 3 times as many yards as Alston. Travis gained 10 yards more than Carlos, and altogether they had 430 yards. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can write your define. Okay, so if you can't pull anything out with variables, you should at least be able to pull out that there were 3 players, Carlos, Alston, and Travis, and altogether they had 430 yards. So let's break it down. It says Carlos gained 3 times as many yards as Alston. So as Alston means that I need Alston first. Alston is X. Carlos gained 3 times as many as him. So that's going to be 3x. Okay, so this is what it's looking like. And then we have the next person, and it says Travis gained 10 yards more than Carlos. So we have to take the number for Carlos, which is 3x, and add 10. It's 10 more yards than Carlos. Altogether, the 3 players gained 430 miles. Okay, so your next step is to write an equation. You're using 3x, x, 3x plus 10, and 430. Go ahead and write your equation. Okay, your equation should look something like this. 3x, which is Carlos, Alston was x, and then Travis was 3x plus 10, okay, equals 430. So now we have to simplify. We're going to combine the things that are the same. 3x, x, and 3x are all the same. 3x plus 1x is 4x, plus 3x is 7x. Then we have a plus 10. Now we can solve this. First step you should be thinking already is to subtract 10. What I'm left with is 7x equals 420. Last step, divide by 7. Running out of room here. So I'm getting x equals 60. What does x represent? It represents Alston. So we go back up here, x is 60. Then Carlos is 3 times 60. So he had 180 yards. Okay, and then Travis had 10 more than Carlos, if you remember. So if Carlos had 180, then Travis had 190. So the question asked how many yards did Carlos gain? So our sentence needs to answer that question. So Carlos gained 180 yards. So here's the last thing. Carlos gained 180 yards. That's your sentence that answers the question.